Hit record. Hit record.
Hey, this is Conversations for Men Women Need to Hear, and we're talking about emotional safety. Emotional safety is the foundation to any healthy relationship. The show is sponsored by Chew on This Media LLC and Visualize Unlimited LLC. I'm Angeline Chu Longshore, along with Zealous Daniel. Zealous, how's it going? Good? Are you good? Are you good?
Going really good. Yeah,
Cool.
in my world. Yeah, we're struggling. We're struggling. Oh, let's see if we can push forward a little bit here. We're getting a little of the Zoom glitch, but it's like the CD skipping from the 90s. Power through.
Exactly. All right, well, let's just try. We're talking about emotional safety, and it's a topic that not a lot of people really talk about very often. We focus a lot about on different other things with relationships and how we're feeling, but this is the thing that actually needs to be in every single relationship that's healthy and good, whether it's marriage, whether it's with your children, whether it's with friendships, whether it's with your family members. And I was just saying, Zealous, that you and I have this feeling, I feel extremely emotionally safe with you. And that is why we can have these really out there discussions. And I don't feel worried that you're going to hate me, that you're going to get triggered or you're going to try to trigger me. There's like this, there's a trust that is there that we can really go places in our discussions. And so, that's one of those things that I think when you have that in any relationship, it's a good thing, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it just has to do with like this feeling like you're not going to judge me. Like when you say something and it's you don't have to have that like this is the way it is. It's like we have this conversation where I might say something that is totally offensive or from a wrong perspective, and I know that you're not going to like be disappointed or frustrated or angry. You'll be like, oh, just redirect perspective. And that's I think that's where relationship communication and feeling safe to communicate in a relationship is really rough. It's like, especially if you have uh, a history of confrontation, you want to avoid those confrontations, or um, you were talking a little bit about safety being like allowing for vulnerability. And it's like, as soon as you don't have that safety, you trigger, a defense. And then as soon as somebody's on the defense, everything you say becomes offensive, and it's like, oh, you don't have that safety to talk about things from the 360 different perspectives.
hmm Last time we talked about trust, and this feeds right into that discussion because in order to build trust, you have to feel emotionally safe. You can't build trust without that. And you can't build intimacy. You can't build a bond. When I think about if I feel emotionally unsafe with somebody, I am cautious. I'm a little worried. I wonder if I'm going to trigger them, if they're going to trigger me, if something bad is going to happen. And that, that does not build this bond. And whenever we're dealing with
Hmm.
anyone, we want connection. I mean, as humans, we need connection. And, so if it's a child or with your siblings or anything, if we feel threatened, then automatically there's this barrier that goes up. And we start to kind of like recede and isolate and protect. And, in all those ways that we're not consciously trying to separate from that person, but when we do, these behaviors come about, and then those behaviors trigger other behaviors from the other person. So I'm sure you've seen that
Yeah.
in your relationship or relationships.
No, so much of it of the challenge of a relationship, a long-term relationship, is that you have all of this snowball effect where your past confrontations just carry over energies, and they trigger past conflict. And I recognize there's a lot of things that I would just really needed to avoid. And it was like not even that I wanted to avoid. It's like I know the real triggering things, or if I hit on my partner's like, deep seated uh, issues, that like it was going to really hurt her, and that you know 6 months, 6 days down the road, it didn't matter, that like she was going to really feel the pain of that. And that like that one thing I said would really be the thing that she took away from. And that was like the only thing that she would hear. And it was almost the point where I got the feeling like it would be like playing in her head on repeat, and it would just be chiseling away, where it was like not my intention by any way, shape, or form, though I was maybe trying to approach a core issue. So it's like once you start, boy, if I say the wrong thing, my partner's going to hold on to that and resent me, and it's going to make anything in the conversation unproductive. Address these issues. Gosh, whenever I talk about any of their like real areas that are challenging for them, that it's not going to end well. So it's like, let's just avoid talking about these things. It's like if people have issues about, any of their personal issues, and you're
Well, I think that yeah, your audio went down, but what I think that you're saying is like that not triggering them is something that you have worked on, and I think you're really good at that. As far as not like trying not to trigger, and I also think that there's another way that could possibly be worked in being able to voice and discover things that are topics that are sensitive if we have that foundation of trust, if we have that emotional safety.
yeah,
And when we don't have that, that's when we're tiptoeing, with whatever
yeah.
relationship, whomever it is, we're tiptoeing because we don't want to trigger that person. So if that person feels safe and we feel safe, that's when we can get into the nitty gritty of those things that we really, I wouldn't say need, but want to work on, that we want to deepen our relationship. We want to reap the rewards of getting closer and building more trust and having this sense of comfort with our partner that feels so relaxed and supportive at the same
Hmm.
time. And if we can build that kind of safety with each other, that's when these discussions can really get into tricky topics. And I've experienced that with my husband, and I've experienced that with my siblings. Um, it has to be a shared, agreed upon experience that you're having, that you where you both feel safe and you built the safety in. Um, Kind of stepping back a little bit, oh, maybe you have some thoughts on that before I go on to like something else I was thinking.
I mean, yeah, I think that that's where counseling comes in. It's like when you have that rapport with a counselor, whether it's your couples counseling or your personal counselor, that's what they're there for, is to allow you to be safe and to feel safe. And I think it can be really challenging when you need to have that person there, to feel safe communicating with your partner, because it's you know you can't just have a counselor whenever you need to resolve conflict. But I think that's really what the counselors are there for. And they're not to take away from counseling. I think that is actually a really, really good thing. But people need to kind of like realize, hey, why don't I feel safe? Because maybe a lot of that not feeling safe is that they don't want to be vulnerable. You can't go and put like, I don't feel safe, and project that onto your partner and say, I don't feel safe talking about this with you. It's, I'm not feeling safe, and there's a number of reasons why. And how can we go about being safe? and it's, feeling, that you can be vulnerable, and and that, a lot of that starts from right here, and then right there with it, it's like, if you don't feel safe with your partner, then your partner's not going to feel safe with you. We're energetically in tune, and you know it's like, I think that's where you have the quiet, silent tension in the household, and people are each other, and you just don't want to have an argument blow up or an issue, so you get real, and you just, the divide grows. It's like, if you don't feel safe to communicate about these core things with your partner, you're going to become really distant.
Hmm. Well, like you're saying, we can't always have a counselor with us in our back pocket to bring out every time we have a sensitive issue going on or something that we want to bring up. And so it really is, like you said, right here, it's about us learning how to be more emotionally intelligent in order to read the other person, in order to interact in a way where we're empathetic and we're not like walking on eggshells, but really being emotionally intelligent in observing, in receiving information that's not always in words, and that sensing, which I think men have gotten really good at. Women have it quite a bit, and men have it even more so now because they're spending more time with children, and children need it a lot because they don't have their words necessarily. So it's that building of empathy without words, and to seeing where that other person is at, and where that person is at, you can help them to hold space for them, so they're less worried about a threat. They're more feeling like this support. They're feeling heard. They're feeling understood. They're feeling like you're welcoming their thoughts, even if they're very different from your own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think you have an interesting network of men that you're exposed to there. Like in Hawaii, a lot of the conversations you have referenced have been with like fathers at the Waldorf school, and I think that it's probably a different world in Arkansas or Texas, or um, I think that there is very much this new age, you know, male that is um, trying to put these social norms behind, and to elevate, with the rising empowerment of women, and it has the cause and effect. It's like, whenever the scale tips one way, it's going to affect other ways. So it's like, as the women become more masculine, the men are becoming more feminized, and vice versa. It's very interesting. It's an interesting time that we're living in, and we're just trying to create balance, and make sure that everybody is where they're supposed to be, because it isn't so much about your gender. It's about, like, having that duality and that yin and yang in a relationship, in order to, like, have balance and to work well. So
Well, I
I just
have
wanted to
talked
comment
to
there about your
where I am and the particular dads I've talked to. It is true. And then I have actually talked to some of their friends on a show, on some of these episodes prior to this, doing this with you, that were in New Jersey, in New York, in different parts of the country. And it's interesting that there is a difference of maybe where they are. They're still dealing with the rising empowerment of women. I mean, that's an American thing. So there's shades of gray in exactly how we're experiencing our worlds, and at the same time, their women, American women, are going through a lot of the same cultural things. And of course, not
mhm.
every single woman fits into a particular category. We are all individuals. As you know, my sisters always remind me that I am very different from them, and what I see and what I think about women and men might be completely different from what they actually do in their relationships. And that's true. So in generalities, we're talking about women coming through the, tribal to industrial age, to women in the workplace, and through feminism and to where we are today, which all Americans pretty much have been influenced by that, whether men or women, and our generation. Um, and so the men that we talk to are dealing with that. They deal with this kind of thing, and just trying to think about how that affects their feeling of relationship of safety, when they're dealing with a woman who maybe is working more, maybe is much more strong and feeling empowered, and how they fit into that.
Um, yeah, I think we are definitely having technical issues today, guys. Thanks for your patience. One of the things that kind of brought this safety topic up was talking to someone else, because these conversations that we share affect, my interactions and conversations with people in my everyday life. And I was talking to somebody about how, the matriarchs really kind of have run the household, and really run a lot of the family dynamic, and how women have kind of taken on this more masculine role to do so, and it's not necessarily the better way to go. I think that the matriarch feminine way of influence and rule is more gentle, and the overall morale of the family stays higher. And their response was like, well, what they need to be able to rule in the matriarch. And I was about to say something and guess. I was like, this is a learning moment. What are they going to say? This is a teaching moment. And they're like, they need to feel safe. And it's like, you're right, And I think that there's that element that I got from it, was that they need to feel like their partner, their man, is going to provide the safety and security that their family need. And they're like, okay, so it's almost like, we have a lot of these connections with, ancient times of the king and queen, and it's like, well, the king can be really strong and confident, and he can be ruling the kingdom, and the matriarch is really the one that's like helping influence and making a lot of the real core decisions. But like, the king has got to have a strong army for everybody to feel safe. It's like there's this whole kind of trickle down way that everything's going to go. And so, if the king's got a strong army, then the queen's going to feel safe, and that's going to allow her to make decisions and influence and keep the overall kingdom morale high, than like this real arrogant, strong, forcing, dominant king. It's like that's ultimately what you can like think of your family and your home as your castle, and your kids are your family, and you want everybody to be as happy as possible.
Hmm. What brings that brings me to think about our brains. I always think about what's happening in our brain, and with emotional safety, if we don't feel safe, then there's this difference in the nurturing aspect. So as you were saying, like the matriarch, she will nurture her realm. Like you think of her whole kingdom. She's there helping to make things work. Like I think of it as like gears in a clock, like clockwork, where she will make sure each piece is happening while the king is off fighting, or doing whatever he's doing to conquer other kingdoms. And it's in a really nurturing way, so everyone feels supported. And if she feels that her king or her kingdom is under threat and no one is there, then anyone's feeling threatened, actually. There's this thing that happens in your prefrontal cortex, and you are in your rational trying to figure out how you're going to protect yourself, and your adrenaline is up because you need to fight the tiger or whatever you feel. That's what it feels like. You're like suddenly under attack by, in your body. It feels like a wild animal is going to come eat you. And so your reactions are not nurturing, are not loving, are not going to be that way if you don't feel safe in general. And then if you don't feel emotionally safe, it's the same
Hmm.
thing. You feel like I've got to protect myself. I've got to put up these walls, these barriers. I feel worried and suspicious of other people who might be a threat. It becomes isolating rather than bonding. And when you're running a family or you're even having just a relationship or a sibling relationship or friendship relationship, it's about connection. And the way to connect, you cannot have these barriers of suspicion, of protection, of worry. And those behaviors will cause you to do something in a certain behavior toward that person. And then that person does something, and it becomes this ripple effect of these behaviors that we don't really even want from each other. So that whole
Hmm.
thing does not work when we feel under threat, as you were talking about that need for protection.
Yeah. And then there's the whole conflict that's going to arise when, say the matriarch, she doesn't feel safe. So she's going to start trying to protect her family. And if she doesn't like what her partner's doing, then she's going to be like, no, no, no. They're going to start undermining each other's decision. And there's nothing more challenging than having someone, your partner, undermine your choices. We're so likely to undermine our own thoughts and our own choices, and then to have your partner coming in, it's like, you just get on real rocky ground. And I think that the idea of like what to do to create safety really is like built off of trust. It's like when you can have that trust, that's going to give you like safety.
There's
And yeah, it's
oh, I couldn't tell if you're saying something. Um, there's this feeling of being cautious because if you're being blamed or shamed in these conversations, then you're, it's almost like the antithesis to being cherished, respected, listened to, heard, seen. These are all things that a child needs. You need to be seen, heard, respected, cherished, loved. In any relationship, that is wonderful. And if you're either party is feeling protective, then there is this sense of, when you have a conversation, this blame or shame or worry or, like there's this defensiveness that comes about in your conversation. I can just feel it as I'm just imagining a conversation happening. And, we can't have things just roll off our back when those things happen as if we were in an emotionally safe place. It's just like, oh, well, of course he didn't mean that in a hurtful way. He's just trying to figure out something. That's what I think when I have a conversation with my husband, because I feel emotionally safe and that he's not intentionally trying to hurt me. He's not trying to shame me or blame me. It's like he's just discovering or trying to work his way into what's going on here. What does this mean? So I can feel like that when I feel emotionally safe. And if not, then suddenly I get defensive. Suddenly I'm like, oh, he's blaming me, or am I culpable? And I feel guilty. All these things happen and it gets really misconstrued. So
mm-hmm.
just building that, like you were saying, that trust and opening up that assumption of good. That's what John Gottman, this psychologist, talks about, is this assumption that somebody is coming from a place of good, and that is part of the
I think that's
trust.
really Yeah, that's a super important part of it is trusting that your partner has the best intentions, and that's really uh, one of the best ways to kind of have that safety in your relationship. And it's interesting to me that like when you get involved in a new relationship, you have a tremendous amount of that. It's like you like this person and you're feeling good and they make you feel good, and it's you really are doing things to show your best intention, and there's a lot of that like best intention idea in the beginning of a relationship. And I'm curious how you keep that. It's like, do you have to consciously make effort, or how does it go to that point where it's like everything I would say would just be taken in the wrong context, and you know it made communication really difficult because I didn't want to hit any triggers. It's like there's lots of like avoidance going on, and then that doesn't feel natural. That's just as received, and they're just as aware of it as I am. So then you become just more distant and more distrustful. And it's how do you keep um that feeling of they've got my best interest, or they have the best intentions of what they're communicating.
Well, I would say we need to look deeply at what it is we're doing when we're in that romantic phase. And what we're doing is we're really listening carefully. We're trying to pick up clues as to what this person likes, be favorable, to them in that way, and say, oh, it looks like she's saying this. I'm going to go get that flavor of ice cream that she likes because she mentioned something cold and she said she loves strawberries. So, and so we're kind of like our brains and our ears are like really tuned in to what is it that they're saying between the lines, because we want so badly for this relationship to work. And there's all these hormones that are going on also. We have this lust and this romantic phase of like all these hormones going on that actually are the bonding hormones. So, with that and the listening, we think of if we can take those things, listen carefully, and care so much to continue that bond, where are we do act differently, and our physical chemistry is different. So to keep that physical chemistry, we need to keep that bond, that kind of romantic phase going. And we talked about this in a different show, if you recall. Do you want me to just briefly say what that was if you don't recall?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
That was
Yes, please.
to keep things novel. So
Yes.
if we're in that comfortable phase with our long term relationship, we can bring that romantic excitement in to that comfortable relationship by doing novel things. So it's listening and thinking, okay, I've been married to my wife for 20 years, and let me see what she's into now. Let me listen really carefully. Let me see what she gets a little glint in her eye about or a little excited about. And I'm going to think about that and how I can make that even more for her, support that even more, surprise her with something that's related to that. Even if it's a quote from the internet, or, it's just something that tells her you were really paying attention and listening. And she will feel so supported and be like, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Then that connection happens.
I think I have this visualization or relation to like computers, where it's like we talk about listening. It's like you know I got a lot of like, you're not listening to me, or the kids aren't listening to me. And it's like, I hear the words, and it's really a matter of like processing. It's like you really, and I think you get into a new relationship, and it's like getting a new computer, where it's just like, you can just process all of this information, and you're just uploading files smoothly. And then as time goes on, you have more information, you're not as focused, you have all of these apps up and running. And it's like, you know, so you're in the relationship, and you're like, no, I hear you, I'm listening, and it's just like, still the computer is just like, I'm sorting, trying to get the information out. And it's not, I think the term listening, or you're not listening, it should be like, just take some time to process what I'm saying, you know and I think that's really like going to be a key in understanding and building in that relationship, is just like recognize, like, and it's, you have a lot going on. It's just like, you had a crazy day at work, you're concerned about this, you've got your fantasy idea of the vacation next month, you're thinking about whether or not you're going to be able to get a new car this year, and the TV's on and the kids are screaming, and your partner's over here like, gosh, I would really like it if I could get away this weekend and have some time with my mom. And, it's like, you know, I heard the words, but my brain was not processing, oh, what do I need to do to make this little trip feasible for you? Like, oh, okay, let me see. Can I get somebody to help with this project? And, so I think a lot of it has to do with,
Processing, right?
trying to simplify processing and just it's a matter of like recognizing when your partner, like your core partner, your person is speaking, that you need to try to tune the rest of that stuff out to really get the information they're saying. And, to go and recognize that, in this day and age where we have multiple kids and all this shit going on, don't expect your partner to like be able to process these little things that you say. It's like we need to have like multiple input. It's like, tell me about it now, and then tell me about it again later, and then ask me if I had time. And you don't have to, but if you build these skills and you're aware of this, then you can be like, not dealing with the frustration of like, oh, my partner is not listening to me. I told you I needed you to do this for me last week and you haven't done it yet. And that's like, well, when did you say to do that? It's like, I feel like I'm describing like the most typical American, like, marital conflict. It's like, and it's because we have so much stuff going on, and we have to just, you know learn tools on both sides. It's not entirely one person or the other, because you're on the same team and you want communication between your team to be as good as possible. So everybody's got a lot of shit going on. You got to, you know figure out several different ways to improve communication.
Hmm. Um, I love where you went with this as far as the processing, like a computer, because I was doing some research and they talked about one of the solutions is, like you said, you're so intuitive. It starts here, it starts with us. We are the processors. And in this research, it talked about the emotional intelligence. So if we are processing what's going on and we're working on our own inner workings of our computer, of being more efficient in processing by being more emotionally intelligent, then we can handle those things. We can calm down when a zillion things are going on. We'll be better at that. When we can calm ourselves down better and kind of push aside the things that don't matter and prioritize and listen between the lines of what people are saying, that's the processor that is
Hmm.
actually being able to then put out the output of what you see on that screen that is beautiful and perfect. So a lot happens between the information going in, being able to emotionally kind of step back, have perspective, prioritize, and know what things that could trigger you, but you're going to go, no, I'm not going to get triggered. I'm going to take the pieces of information that were said in a non triggery way and put it into perspective with the things that the person is not saying, but I see body language and evidence of things that have happened in the past, in the recent past, that upset them, and then put those together to formulate the thing that becomes the beautiful thing on the screen that is well received. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of processing that happens with all these pieces. And that is the perfect analogy when you think about it. It's like we need to be intelligent processors. So that emotional intelligence is something that we can work on individually, each one of us. And that's
Yeah.
how, moving forward, we can create that emotional safety for each other.
Hmm. And also just to recognize too that, men have these strengths. It's like we were talking about how men are really good at, like, you know getting the TV to connect to the computer, and, this, all
The
of these like
linear
weird.
brain.
Yeah, and I was like, why is that? It's so common, and it's like, we don't really argue about that in the family. It's like, honey, my computer's not working. Well, what's the problem? And it's one of these things that men have this linear dominant. I think we both have the masculine and feminine in us, but men typically are going to be more dominant in that linear way. And then the women, I think, it's almost the perfect terminology, the way that it works out, of like, women are more software oriented. They're going to know the right app. They have a little bit more of an intuitive niche about like what kind of software is going to work good. So I think of like how there's that family dynamic. It's like there's conflict with the kids, and my first thing to go and look at is like, what's in their hand? What are they doing? Is there, like, what's physically the thing that's going, how I'm going to resolution with the children. And I think that women are more emotionally in tune, so they're going to address the emotional. What emotional state is my kid in, and how can I emotionally, support them, or given an emotional redirect. And it's kind of funny, the computer technology, hardware, software. What's the opposite of a linear, or the feminine of the linear mind?
Hmm.
That's a question for you.
Oh,
So you
what
have
is?
if the masculine are more linear oriented, what is the inverse, or what is the feminine
It's
strength?
it's the intuitive and the multitasking brain. And that works into the matriarchal role as being extremely efficient in that clock that works all the gears. And so if he is able to multitask and feel what each person needs to support each person, each gear is going to be working efficiently. And each gear I see as spinning off into the outer world of doing their brilliant thing as the individual does. So it could be a child, it could be the husband, it could be the other adult in their life. And that woman who is the center, the hub, supporting all these things to happen, will have all these pieces of the family spinning off out in the world and coming back with reciprocity to bring back the goods of being supported. So it actually works extremely well for a woman, typically with these innate abilities to be able to, feel, sense, nurture, support, help each individual, man or woman, to go out into the world to be their special, brilliant self, to be seen as that particular skill and skill set and talent. And then they come back and they feel like they belong to this hub. This hub has supported them, it's nurtured them, it's seen them, it's heard them, it's listened, and it continues to support. So that's how that beautiful dynamic works with what we're given innately as a feminine person with these skills. And the man naturally protects, and a woman feels extremely safe when a man is protecting that realm. So in these natural roles they're built in, it makes sense. It doesn't have to be that way in every family. Others can take these different roles and do these different things. Um, and I think if we have these innately, why not utilize them? And then also utilize our
Yeah.
opposite too that we've built. We have these strengths, male and female, in all of us. So this is the new world.
Yeah. It's interesting, the analogy here. I just see the way that it can really explain a lot of different things. It makes me almost put a little more, another marble in the bucket of trust for uh, Elon Musk's whole. It's not his, but the idea that we could be living in a simulation. But it's like one of these things. Just working through some of our technical struggles for today. It's like, you know and to see how there's things with software that's like, sometimes there's these little glitches in the software, and it's like, oh, we started over, oh, you're muted again, and or things aren't working. What are you going to do when the software isn't working right? Well, it's just like, close out the app, reopen it, and sometimes it magically works. And I think that that's something that's kind of important to go and recognize in relationships of like, hey, if something isn't working, don't continue to get frustrated that it's like not, that it's continuing to be glitchy, you know? It's like, maybe you just need to turn the system off,
Reset.
reboot, and
Mhm.
start all over, because you're going to just get really frustrated because it was just working so smooth. And it's like, I feel like that's something that we can recognize as our biggest tool in the toolbox of relationships is sometimes you just need to fucking sleep. You know, it's like, just turn off, get some sleep, get some fuel, and let's talk about this again tomorrow, because we're triggered. And if it's not, you know, I'm over here trying to to hardware fix something that's a software problem, it's not going to happen. And vice versa too. It's like, you know, if there's a hardware issue, that you're going to have to deal with that in a different way. And ultimately it's going to be power off as the big reset, shut everything off, turn it back on. You
Yeah,
try unplugging it.
here's another analogy with that, of resetting, rebooting, going to sleep, and showing up the next day. And we've talked about this before, where we can have that clean slate. So that is basically the visual of emotional safety. Is if we can take all of our triggers that are on the table, we're holding these cards and we're secretive and we're wondering, should I put that down? Should I show it? Or here's all my cards and accept that. Rather than do that, we just take everything off the table. And here we are together looking at each other face to face with a clean slate. That is this feeling of, I trust that we're going to be honest with each other and that we're going to hold space to really have this conversation, that we share this clear table together to build upon. This is our building spot. And if we can do that by stepping back, getting good rest, stepping back, and then having the emotional intelligence to, here's my card. Look at the person, decide how that's affecting them, and let's discover what we want with this card. Does it make sense anymore? Does it feed our family, nourish our family on all levels? And then look at each one. So that could be a visual of how we actually do that emotional safety piece when we're having an issue. And it's worked in my relationship. It takes a lot of trust, it takes a lot of emotional safety, and not being worried or afraid that someone's going to just like scalp you if you put down, like something, and that you're they're going to stab you in the back if you say something. And so it's really it's scary. It is.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of bravery. It's not, we're not asking you to do something that's simple. We're proposing something that is really new and different. And that reset, you're worried that if I turn my computer off, I might lose all my data. you know, that freaks a lot of people out. And then where do I go from
Yeah.
there? There's no path. I don't know. But here's the visual path. Really, you can start fresh and trust that what is going to come up on that table is going to be built new and even better.
Yeah, I think people also need to realize that, you know, your partner's going to play off the cards that you know, and you have to kind of like recognize, like, I'm triggered, I'm being, reactionary or aggressive, or I'm not, I am projecting, or I'm having this thought that is not my partner having the best intention, you know. So it's like, there need to control before your partners. So I think there's an element of kind of trying to recognize, like, oh, I'm feeling conflict coming up, and I'm hearing these words coming out of their mouth, and I'm already sensing negativity, and they haven't finished their sentence. I need to change my perspective, because that's the first thing that I can do. Because if I don't change my own perspective and response, then my partner is going to be reading and playing off of it, and so you become less and less genuine, and you can't change, your partner. You can work through the idea and structure of how you're going to communicate, but you have to recognize that you have a lot of effect and control in your communication and your relationship and how you're processing things is what it
Mm-hmm.
really comes back to, is like, and you need to think that your partner has your best interest and that they're suggesting ideas that you might be uncomfortable with. And why are you uncomfortable with them? Oftentimes those are going to be the areas that you need the most work on. I mean, that's just something we know is key in relationships. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could go into a whole nother topic about friendships and women supporting women. But actually, I'm thinking that that's actually a whole nother topic that we get into as far as creating the tribe that we really need in order for our relationships to work. Because as the single lone man and single lone woman with the family in the individual house, that dynamic doesn't work. We've talked about the matriarch and all those pieces that spin together with a community of people. And I was going to talk about that, but I thought, you know what? There's a whole nother show. And also this piece about children needing that emotional safety. That actually could go on for another half hour or so. you know.
yeah, no, I think between our technical issues with this episode, and I think we kind of turned up a few different topics that we should address specifically here. Um, so yeah, I think that let's hit this again, and hopefully the Zoom gods and the software and the hardware will work a little smoother here. You never know. Could be solar flares, could be high usage. I think that's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, it's hard to say. But we talked about some really, really great things. And um, I just want to wrap up in saying that if we can just keep that in mind in our relationships moving forward, as how do I create emotional safety? How do I create that in my everyday interaction with my every single person that I deal with? It will be an easier, more loving, more supportive world if we do that. So just keep that in mind if I'll leave you with that.
Yeah.
You have another thought?
Yeah, just the thought that popped to my mind is how people are considerate of each other's insecurities and how you do that in a kind way. And yet I think that it can be challenging. It's like, how do we deal with that where you don't want to draw any attention to someone you care about's insecurities, but yet if you see a way to work through them, or that holding back comes with challenges as well. So I think that's something we could just try to talk about more in the future. But there's a very delicate balance there, because you have to be receptive to your person's insecurities, but yet you also have to be genuine with your feelings and help carry the family forward.
Mm-hmm. That is a really juicy topic. I can see where this could go, and it's going to be a great conversation. So watch, maybe that might pop up next week or so.
Yeah,
All
cool.
right. Are we good
I think we're good
for
for now.
today?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys. This is Conversations for Men Women Need to Hear, and we'll see you next week. See you.